the capital of Washington State, but it's actually a small town. And we were studying photography, and this was the kind of work that we were being shown. I don't know if there's any photo students here, but you'll recognize it's an Ansel Adams gelatin print. And we were basically told that this is a horrible reproduction of it. I mean, probably photo people are being really pissed right now, but the whole idea that we were being told as students, as photo students, was, oh, look at the dark blacks and the grays and the whites and the silvers and the zone system. And I was just like, it's a fucking tree. I didn't get it. Like, it was kind of like going to like a Wilco concert or something, and everybody's so into it. And I'm like, it just doesn't, I'm like, it doesn't speak to me. Like, I just didn't get it. And it made me feel crazy because I was like, what does this have to do with my life? Back to my friends. We were hanging out and we started talking. One of us, I don't remember who, somebody got their hands on a feminist book because there actually wasn't a great women's studies program at our school. We would have one class that had anything to do with women going at a time, like, you know, women in Victorian literature or something like that. But one of us read some feminist book and started telling the others about it. We started talking about how we couldn't even leave our apartments and make it to the bus stop without getting harassed by men who would say stuff like, you know, oh, you're a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, or nice ass, or like whatever. And I was like, whoa, that happens to you too. Like, it had never kind of dawned on me that I was not the only person this was happening to, and that it had to do with like this huge overarching oppression of women in a way that men kept us feeling like we were always being watched and always being judged. And I had thought it was me, like my body was disgusting and was drawing these comments, and all of a sudden I was kind of liberated from that feeling that I was this awful person who deserved these kinds of things to happen to me. And then I was being shown this Ansel Adams photograph and being told that's what kind of art I was supposed to make. And I just couldn't, I couldn't rectify the two, and me and my friends, who I keep showing you because I love them so much, we started meeting at each other's apartments and getting, this was pre-internet, so we had to go to the library, and we would get art forum, and we would Xerox articles. And one of them was about Jenny Holzer, and I saw this image for the first time, and I was like, that is punk rock. This person is using language, putting it up on a wall and saying it's a photograph. That's fucking cool. And it spoke to me, and it made me think. She's also turning them into like big pieces of silver that she etched and saying that's a sculpture. She was also turning them into t-shirts and hats, as was, now I'm having a total brain freeze, Barbara Kruger. So Barbara Kruger did actually what Jenny Holzer said. She took something from the dominant culture in order to change it. She took images from magazines and that were meant to sell things to consumers, and then she challenged capitalism by cutting them up and reforming them and making different things. She also talked about sexism, and she made postcards. So all of a sudden I saw that art didn't have to be this thing in this like massive frame that the goal was to put it in a museum or a gallery. It was an exchange. It was like you could write a postcard to your friend on like a Jenny Holzer or a Barbara Kruger artwork. And it really changed my life. And I kind of, in a way, went from being their audience to being somebody that was inspired enough to take action. And so this was my first performance. It's Flyer. And I made it about street harassment, and I stood on the street outside my apartment and I handed it to women. And I had to negotiate when men would want them and they weren't for them. And so I had to deal with that, and in a way that was a performance. And I would give them to women and I would see them throw them in the trash can or throw them on the ground. And I would see some women shaking their heads. And some women just thought I was told, like, creep, and like, we're like, no, like, you know, like I was gonna give them a Subway sandwiches, like, coupon or something. Which doesn't mean you're a creep, it was just like, you know, I don't want your coupon. But it was a really amazing feeling to go outside of my apartment, and I made up a fake group, the Girl Sprouts, which was really just me. But I read somewhere that companies like Tide or Tide detergent, if they get one letter from somebody, and now it's probably an email, they count it as 200 people, because there's 199 lazy people who don't bother to write the letter but feel the same way. So I decided everything I did was for 200. There's 199 other people who felt the same way I did. That was my logic. So my next performance was this. It was a flyer that said slut, and that was another kind of a word that followed me at arm's length everywhere I went, in junior high and high school. And it's not like I did anything to deserve it, but I didn't understand when I was 15 or 16 and being humiliated on a constant basis, that it was, again, a part of boys being allowed to decide who had power and who didn't have power, and other girls often taking up that mantle of sexism to use against other girls. And as I started to think about that, I was like, I want to go back to my teenage self and hand myself a flyer that's like written kind of in this teenage vernacular. And so that's what I did. I went to my high school and I stood outside and I handed these to girls, and it was super empowering for me. The other thing I did was I put them in books in libraries, like I put them in Judy Blume books and like Babysitter Club type. We didn't actually have Babysitter Club, so I'm kind of lying, but it was like that kind of book. And I loved the idea that a teenager would go home and be, opening this book and this flyer would fall out. And the performance was when they opened it and had a reaction, whatever that reaction was. And it was almost like this private, I thought of it as a private performance that I didn't get to see. Anyways, I feel like even my artwork started to become performative, and that's what was leading me in the direction of music. So my photography changed. I stopped taking pictures of trees like I was supposed to. And I started making these crazy posters, like using pictures of myself. And I made this. And this was what got me censored from my college art show that was like the end of the semester art show that I was in. And what's funny is that these images are actually from the college library. And the one on the right, which is basically child pornography, was in a book about how to take portraits of children. And the male who wrote about it was absolutely despicable. And I really wanted to kind of draw attention to the fact that this image was in our library by making this piece. And I was censored and it was taken down. And that's why me and my friends started an art gallery. Because, you can fight the system sometimes, and sometimes you just have to go off on your own. But nobody was buying feminist art in Olympia, Washington, as you can imagine. And even though the rent was super cheap, we still had to pay it, so we started having bands play. And, here I am booking bands and, getting their food for them and their water for them and their six-pack beer and all this stuff. And it's all guys. And they're getting up on stage and they're singing me about what, stupid girls their girlfriends are. And I'm making, rent off it, but at the same time, I'm like, this is totally messed up. So me and my girlfriend started a band called Amy Carter, and we became the feminist opening band for every show. We had 4 songs. But then I started another band called Bikini Kills. And having been at the audience at punk shows and being pushed around so much, and then all of a sudden being on the stage, I was acutely aware of what it felt like to be a girl in the audience who isn't allowed to get up to the front because everyone's moshing, and if you get in the mosh pit, they actually try to hurt you or grope you. And I remember me and my 3 girlfriends, and a lot of times there only being 3 or 4 women at shows, just standing in the back, trying to stay out of the fray, watching Courage and Conformity or whatever bands, the Pepper Pie bands we were watching. And so when I started a band, it was really, really important to me that it was different and that we transformed the room. that we took these typically male-dominated spaces of rock venues, and that we flipped them over. And so we asked girls to come up front, and it was a really, really simple request, and we thought it was absolutely no big deal, because we were in a punk scene. And like, it's alternative, right? Like, people are cool, and they're raising questions. And guys got really pissed. And all we did was we said, hey, if girls want to, come up to the front. And some girls wanted to, and some girls didn't. But it was a call to participation. It was a call to also protect us, because our shows often got violent. We announced right away, we are a radical feminist band. And in doing that, we set ourselves up for a lot of violence and a lot of hatred. And asking the girls to come to the front was kind of a twofold thing. It was one, to protect us, our safety, and it was also so that girls could see how easy it was to be in a band. Because how are they going to see how easy it is to like move your hands on a bass if they're stuck in the back, behind everybody? And so a lot of what we were doing, even performance-wise, in terms of how we played, and that's a really bad slide, how we played and how we, had Xeroxed, that's our cassette demo, and how we had Xerox stuff, and everything was very DIY, and part of the reason was anybody can do what we're doing. It was like, we are not magic unicorns. Like, we're not rock stars. We're just people who realized that the kind of thing that we wanted to see wasn't happening, and so we had to make it happen. And to me, that's what punk rock is. Like, it's not a genre. It's not the Sex Pistols. It's not spitting on an audience or being an asshole. It's saying that corporations don't get to dictate to us what is good culture, what is good writing, good art, good music. They don't get to tell us we have to listen to fucking Jason Mraz if we don't want to. And if we don't see ourselves reflected in culture, that we can pick up instruments, or we can start a cabaret show, or we can do comedy that actually speaks to us and speaks to maybe only our two friends, but that's enough. So that was our demo, and it was called Revolution Girl Style Now, and at every show I'd go, we're Bikini Kills, and we want Revolution Girl Style Now! So it was really obvious what we were doing, and we also put out fanzines, and it was really great because kids wrote us letters because we had our address on our fanzines, and we wrote about feminism and racism and capitalism and all the isms, and also some funny shit. But people would write us letters, and it was really great. An old friend of mine wrote to me about one of the zines where I said, being sexy and powerful is the coolest thing, yeah, or something dumb like that. And she wrote to me and she's like, I'm a big girl, and I'm not considered sexy. Where do I fit into this? And she was basically just wrote out this whole long, kind of critique of that line and other things in our zine about having all of these skinny white girl images in our fanzine, and we printed it in the next issue. And what was so great was that it wasn't just us doing this thing, which is the way it kind of gets historically portrayed, as if there were like my band, Bikini Kills, and this other band, Bratmobile, and we did everything. It was like girls who started promoting shows, girls who wrote back to us and told us we were fucked, girls who started bands. And I remember in Oklahoma playing at a Grange Hall, and we invited the girls up to the front, and they were like terrified. They were like, and finally they made it to the front, and then afterwards, these 5 girls who were at the show who came to the front said, we really want to start a band, but my brother told me that if we plug in the amp, we'll explode. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what a great way to keep girls from playing instruments. I was like, that's so genius. But so we literally went over and we're like, even with it on, even with the amp on, which is really bad, you shouldn't do that, you should blow out the speaker. We went over and just pulled it out and plugged it in over and over and showed her, and we're like, you're gonna be fine. And we came back a year later and they opened for us, and they were a crazy, crazy band. So anyways, that's what I'm trying to get at about the creative audience, is that a lot of times what's going on in the audience is just as important as what's going on stage, and the point is to encourage participation rather than consumption. Because that's what happened to me with the work of Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer. So another thing I learned from Jenny Holzer was, if you're going to take what is dominant in culture to change it, one of the things that's really dominant in culture is advertising. And in the 90s, there's a huge backlash against feminism. And it was like, oh, it doesn't need to exist anymore, everything's equal. And I worked at a domestic violence rape relief shelter, and I saw it fill up over and over and over again, and the phone is ringing off the hook. And I'm being told that sexism doesn't exist, and there's no need for it. And so I started making up slogans like Revolution Girl Style Now, and these kind of slogans, because I was like, feminists need advertising, just like Coke. Like, we need to say we're still here. And a big part of kind of the mission was to take what had happened in the second wave of feminism and not to be like, fuck you, you guys are stupid, you didn't know what you were doing, because I wouldn't exist without second wave feminism or first wave feminism. But to say, how can we recast this to fit our generation and our specific situation? Because we were very much operating within the underground punk scene. So this was a really limited edition type thing. It wasn't like we were politicians who were like spreading out amongst everybody. It was really like a punk rock feminist movement. So it was within music and within fanzine culture and stuff that we really operated. So another thing that happened was a lot of women would come up and give us like their flyers and projects that they were working on in one town, and then we would Xerox them. We would go to the next town, and we would have like a table with all of their work, and it started to feel like something's happening. Like, some more girls start coming to the shows because we're sending them postcards and asking them to show up, and it really, really started growing. And then we got attention from the media. Me. I look really weird in that one in the brain. I just feel like that doesn't even look like me. But that's my bandmate Toby, my bandmate Billy, and Kathy from Bikini Kills. And we started getting all of this attention in like mainstream magazines like Rolling Stone and Spin, and it wasn't really positive attention. It was kind of like all about what we looked like, how we dressed, how, we were man haters probably because we'd experienced abuse as children. It was just like really kind of salacious details that were pitifully superficial, and so we decided not to talk to the mainstream media because it just never really went our way, and we really believed in the underground, and we really believed that that was the best way to do what we were doing. The positive thing about the media, though, was that me and my friend Allison from the band Bratmobile had gone to a show, Verbal Assault, this punk band, and we got phone numbers from a bunch of girls, and we invited them to this punk house, Positive Force, and we had a meeting. And it was much like a consciousness-raising meeting from, do you guys know about, like, in the 70s, like, consciousness-raising meetings? They were like, women would get together and talk, and things like I said earlier, where, they'd be like, wait a minute, you've been sexually harassed? You've been raped? Oh, you've been incest history? Whoa, I have someone to share this with. I'm not alone. I don't have to be silent. Or like, I'm gay. Like, all these different things would happen at these meetings, and they ended up, because there was a fanzine called Riot Girl, being called Riot Girl Meetings. And the positive thing about the media was we actually had a convention in DC, and this horrible USA Today reporter came and wrote a horrible article, but she printed the Riot Girl address and our P.O. box, and we got so much mail, like 1,000 letters, and all these girls all around the country started their own Riot Girl groups, and it was really, really incredible. And the thing that people kind of don't understand when things got historicized or whatever is that it wasn't really a movement. It was like this scattered kind of thing, and it had a lot of different personalities. And one of the things that happened was people were encouraged to write their own manifestos. So it wasn't just one manifesto, like Professor Burde, am I saying it right? Say it. Say it again, because I totally spaced out. Balkin, Professor Stacy Balkin quoted my manifesto, and I actually Xeroxed it for you. So if you guys could hand these out. The dean's gonna help out.
Yeah,
this is fantastic.
Right.
Oh yeah, close up.
You guys could just pass them out. That'd be cool.
Okay.
So I could really totally talk about Rifle, but we'll do questions at the end. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'm bored of talking about questions. So what happened to me personally, because I lived in a small town, was that getting that attention was not a positive thing. Clearly, I had spent a lot of my career trying to do community building, and finally we had this punk feminist scene that was thriving and was interesting and also fucked up in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden I got this attention, and I started feeling unwelcome in the very scene that I had helped to create. Because our scene was about being equal with each other. And all of a sudden, I'm up here on this, 5-foot stage or whatever, but being in the media and living in a small town was like I was on a 20-foot high stage, and I was like a canvas that people could project their own things onto, and it was really confusing. I think it's a lot like being a teacher, actually, because you get a lot of things projected onto you that have nothing to do with like your work. Anyways, so it was really problematic, and I was like only 26 or something. And all of a sudden I was like the leader of this movement, and people were pissed at me because you're saying you're the leader, but I wasn't saying I was the leader. So I was like, fuck it. My band's breaking up, things are a mess. I'm gonna go in my room and write some songs and remember who I am, besides being the bitch from Bikini Kill, which is what I kind of had become, like this stereotype cutout of, a reverse sexist man-hater bitch. And I couldn't take it. I couldn't take the hate mail. I couldn't take the threats. I couldn't take girls worshiping me in a way that was not productive, that wasn't about inspiring more stuff to happen. It was about feeling like I was a statue that I was being looked at. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I made this record called Julie Ruin in 1997, and I went into my bedroom, and this is how I did it. I actually drew a picture on the inside of my process. I had my broken sampler, then I added drums or drum machine, then I added guitar and bass, then I sang. That's a halo on my head, by the way. I can't draw noses or eyes, so I just left that off. Then I added my keyboard, which I actually got from Kmart. It was called the Ratmaster. And I used that, and then I returned it. And then I put it in a 4-track cassette, because that was all I had. But then I started realizing these songs needed more, and I bought myself a reel-to-reel 8-track. And I had the most mind-blowing experience because I'd only worked with male engineers my entire career in Bikini Kill. We would go into studios, and I would always feel super uncomfortable. Like, I didn't understand the equipment, I didn't understand what they were doing, and all of a sudden I had my own soundboard. And I started realizing how to turn the knobs, and that it was like painting. And it was, that's on my phone. No problem. But part of the thing about this project was similar but different from Bikini Kill because it was much more insular and it never toured, but it was meant to have glitches, to have a broken sampler, to sound like it was something that somebody made themselves. And again, the idea was to not have this slick product that felt impenetrable. It was to have something that was vulnerable and weird that other women could see themselves in and could maybe say, I could do a lot better than that, and hopefully try to do a lot better than that. And I think that actually did happen. My next project was called Tigre, and we wore matching costumes and did dances.
Yay.
And part of what our project was about, well, part of it was because NSYNC was out at the time, and I was really into No, I was just like, why do they get to have costumes and dances, and like, we're supposed to be punk rock, and like, we can't be like that. Because there's a part of me that's really like, you know, I just want to act out Grease the movie in my basement for the rest of my life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, am I supposed to pretend that that part of me doesn't exist because I'm a punk rocker? So we were like, how can we make punk rock feminist electronic music? And we thought part of the thing that we could do was put on a show, was be like, look, things in Riot Girl got really weird, my band broke up, I was really depressed. My best friend Johanna was like, we could either be really depressed or we could say, let's give a gift to our community who's given so much to us. Let's put on a big show. And so we had video projection behind us, we had costumes, we had dancing, and part of the thing was to give the audience permission to not be at the Wilco show, standing there pretending like you know the lyrics when you don't, and you're like, how do I act cool? But nothing against Wilco, I actually like one of their records a lot, the Foxtrot one, but I'm just using that as an example. But when we were on stage, what we were trying to do is be ourselves and be totally goofy and give the audience permission to dance together and move and be goofy and be like, hey, we're all at this really weird, freaky slumber party together. And the lyric sheets that we used to hand out in Bikini Kill became video behind us, which we often had our lyrics on, and we had videos that would kind of like share our ideas, because it was always really important to me that people understood what our songs were about. And in Bikini Kill, it was a problem. Clearly I talk a lot, but in Bikini Kill, when I would introduce a song and say, this is about my sister sticking up to my dad when my dad was being abusive, or this is about my friend's incest experience that she allowed me to write about, or this is about, you know, that guy at college who says he's read more feminist books than you have and tells you what feminism is. And what was funny was, you know, I was saying before, there's this idea that it's like we're the punk scene. There's no racism in the punk scene. There's no sexism in the punk scene. We're beyond all that. But the second when I would start talking and saying, you know, this song is about rape, some guy inevitably would yell, shut up, bitch. And while that would hurt my feelings and make me feel bad for a second, I have to say, in hindsight, that person was given permission to participate by my band because the floor was open when we were on stage. And that person did the best thing he possibly could have done. He told everybody in the room, sexism is alive and well in the punk scene, and this band needs to exist. So this is like Tigre performing. Can you turn it up? instruments over backing tracks that went with our video. And part of the idea was that so often as female musicians, we've been treated like we were fake. Like we weren't real bands or real artists or real. And we were like, fine, so we're fake. And we were trying to mess with the idea of what is a real band. Do you have to have a drummer to be a real band, to be a punk rock band? Do you have to sound a certain way to be a punk rock band? Can you just play guitar over something you already made with your video? And I don't know if you could tell what was on the videos behind it, what I was singing, but I was just singing names of artists that the three of us loved, that we wanted to share with our audience. And then behind us was video of those same artists, so that people could maybe get them in their brain, and maybe if they saw a book, you know, by Dorothy Allison, they would go, I know that name, and take it off the shelf. What happened was, this woman, Kristen McCrae, heard the song, and then she made a painting of every single person in the song. And these are some of my favorites I wanted to show you. I really need to buy this one. It's so beautiful. Laura Cottingham is a not very well-known lesbian writer and artist. And when Kristen did this, she also did a website that explained who each person was with links to their work. So it was really this amazing thing where somebody in our audience had taken what we did and then made it something so much larger than what we had originally intended, and then inspired me right back, because I really wish I could paint paint like that. She's really good. So this, I don't know why I even have this slide up, it's like a filler slide, but I got really sick in 2004, 2005, and so my band had to wind down. And I didn't know what I had. It turns out I have late stage Lyme disease, and I'm still in treatment for it, but I'm doing really well. But at the time I was very, very, very sick, and needed desperately to get treatment. And so I started archiving things that I had done. And my work had always been about not just making this thing that could hang on a wall, but a kid would write us a letter in Tigre talking about being afraid to come out to his family and feeling suicidal. And we wrote a song called Keep On Living based on that letter. And that had been a lot of the way that I had worked, is try to write the song that somebody needed, or try to write the song that was the invisible song that I felt should be there but wasn't there, or should have been there for me when I was 15. And when I got sick, I had to start asking other people to write the song for me, or to help me with things. And so I got interns, and I was, I guess, 30 or 39 when I first got sick. And I know a lot of older feminists who are really bitter about the younger generation, who would do that whole thing of oh, they don't get it, and there's no continuum, and they don't care about feminism and stuff like that. And I was trying to do this concert film of Tigre because we worked so hard on our show, and so much feminist work gets erased. I really wanted people to be able to see our show past the point where we were able to perform. But I needed help sifting through all the footage and going through all the audio, and I was so sick that I really needed help. And I put an ad up for interns on the Tigre blog, and I got 800 responses in 2 days. And from that, I got 6 different people actually. One of them who works as the vice president for the Girl Scouts, vice president of publicity for the Girl Scouts, came and interned for me. And it was an amazing experience to have younger people say, yeah, we want to help. We're right there for you. And all of a sudden, I realized that all of the work that I had done was coming back to me tenfold. And so I also allowed this documentary to be made about me, and I had to kind of grapple with the whole thing of being set out from my community by getting more attention than other people had gotten. And it really was unfair. There were a lot of bands that were I think, a lot better than my band, especially bands in England. But when I was approached about doing the film, I was really hesitant, a lot of it because of that reason of like, oh, then it's going to be like I'm this big celebrity or something, I have this movie made about me. And then I was like, well, how much internalized sexism is figuring into this picture where I helped start a fucking movement. And I've done all this work. I've answered every piece of mail I've ever gotten. I've like done rape counseling at like hundreds of shows in alleyways. And I deserve this film. I was just like, fuck it. Like, I was like, I'm an artist. And But I realized that the movie's not about like the riot girl movement or anything. It's about me as an artist and like how I started out and all this kind of stuff I'm talking about. Look, it's my stuff. So then a weird thing happened where one of my best friends who lived with me in Olympia, Washington, got a job as the senior archivist for Failed's library at NYU. And I was joking with her that I had this huge filing cabinet full of riot girl shit that I had been carrying around for 20 years, and I really wanted to get rid of it. And she said, let's start a riot girl archive. And so I put another call out for interns, and they came in and they helped me archive my work. And it was a really great process because I was able to leave in a lot of my really shitty bad art, which felt good. My bad, I hate my dad poetry. My photographs of me like Jesus with menstrual blood, like really embarrassing shit. But I felt like it was important because I wanted people to come and visit the archive and see that like you gotta make a lot of like diarrhea looking paintings before you make a painting like that James Baldwin one. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like all of a sudden you pop out of the womb again, like Magic Unicorn, and you're writing these amazing songs and you're in all these bands and stuff like that. It's like, there's all of this other bad writing that you do that isn't, I'm not saying the Riot Girl Manifesto that I wrote is that good, because I have some issues with it, but at the time, it meant something, and that didn't pop out of nowhere. I wrote a lot of crap that like didn't make any sense before I wrote that, and that's all in the archive. So again, it was this other chance to make art and archive that encouraged participation and people to see themselves in it rather than to see just all of this like, look at how cool I am and all this great stuff I made, look at my cool filing cabinet with the punk stickers on it. There is my cool filing cabinet. The great thing is the archive made a book with the Feminist Press, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm so proud to have my work included in it. And it has various fanzine pages from girls who identified themselves as riot girls. Most people never identified themselves as riot girls, they were just punk rock feminists, but a lot of zine pages from punk rock feminists from the 90s. And the great thing about it is that it's so not cohesive. Everybody has a different opinion. And there's a lot of stuff in it where people are like, you know, I'm black and I feel totally alienated by this. And here's why. And I went to the, you know, Unlearning Racism workshop at the Riot Girl Convention, and it was a complete travesty. And we walked out, you know, I walked out with my friends. And to have all of these arguments and differences and beautiful drawings and great writing all in the same place, I think is really important because it doesn't show a cohesive movement. It shows a snapshot in time, and it shows that there was productive dialogue that happened amongst the unproductive dialogue that also happened. This is me again. I know a lot of pictures of me. This is my new band called The Julie Ruin, and we just wrote a record called Run Fast. And the thing that has been cool is that I'm actually going on tour in 2 weeks. I just came back from tour, and people come up to me after shows or like before shows when I'm hanging out and say that bragging. They say that they took women's studies classes because of me or because of my band, or like Bikini Kill got them into feminism, or Tigre made them feel like they could go to a show and dance or whatever, and it makes me feel like so much more successful than if I sold 1 million records or, made a shitload of money, which I don't, off my work. Stop downloading on the internet, kids. No, I'm just kidding. But the thing about this record, because not to be a downer and get back to my illness, but I was very, very sick and I didn't know what I had, and I was clearly archiving my work because I didn't know how bad it was going to get. And I always wanted to play the songs off my solo record from 1998 live. That's actually how Tigre started as a band, but we couldn't figure it out. So we ended up writing our own records instead. And when I got really sick, I was like, this could be my last chance, like, to play these songs live. I have to find some people and get together and learn them. And so we did, and we could only practice when I was well. And then when we wrote new songs, we could only record when I was well. So it took 3 years to record one record, whereas in Bikini Kill it took 2 days. So I have some pretty nice bandmates. But the thing that was really amazing was my work had been so audience-based for so long. And when I got ill, I realized that I was kind of the person who I needed to save. And that I needed to, how I was writing songs to try to be helpful to other people who had written to me, desperate, and telling me things that they had never told anybody and stuff like that, which is pretty humbling experience. That I was writing the letter to myself saying help, and I responded with this album. I really wrote it for myself, and I felt like after so long of doing the other thing that change was good, and that there was a creative audience out there already, and I didn't need to try anymore. It just was gonna come. I could trust myself as an artist that my value system was gonna show through in my work and was gonna bring the right people to our shows, and it's happened. So it's really incredible. But I wanted to end with the fact that I'm also making visual art. And this was a piece I did with my collaborator, Rebecca Albee, in 2009, but it just showed in 2 shows this year. It just actually got taken down like a couple weeks ago, but it's called In Case of New York City, and it was a collaborative piece where we put out a call to women in New York, and we asked them, post 9/11, like, what do you carry in your backpack or your purse or pocket that makes you feel safe? And we were just interested in the responses, and that's how the piece started. It actually started something totally different than it ended up as that, but it started as a diarrhea painting, basically. And then it started turning into this other thing. We were really interested in what responses we would get. And we got stuff from like, I have to carry Rescue Remedy, or my lip balm, or what other things? I always have to have a cup of coffee. Purell, very popular. And then some people had stuff like mace or knives. And some people had a picture of their child or a picture of their girlfriend. And it was really interesting that it started being not just about physical safety, but about psychological safety. And when we showed the piece for the first time, I was walking around the gallery, and the show was about war and violence. That's why we picked the theme. It's a great idea, right? A show about war and violence. I was like, yay! But that's why we picked the theme of safety, physical safety, and then it became about psychological safety. And I was walking around, and maybe this is a little TMI, but I had my period. I got my period at the show, and I was like, does anybody have a tampon? And since this is kind of a feminist lecture, I feel like I can say this. That I should at least say tampon one time during the feminist lecture. That's part of the thing that they said. If you want your check, you have to mention your period or tampon. And I was like, oh, I need a tampon. Nobody has a tampon. This really sucks. Like, whatever. End of the night, I walk over to the case, and I see that women have left things on top of the case. little like talisman kind of thing. Trying to think of the other stuff people left. But there was a bunch of stuff, and there was a bag that somebody had left underneath. It was like somebody, you can see in that picture, someone charged their phone and set it on the case. And we were like, that's awesome. Like, we weren't like, oh, that's ruining our peace. We're like, that is our peace, because the cell phone is the thing that people carry now that makes them feel safe. It was totally awesome. But the great thing was there was somebody left a tampon on the top of the thing. And I was like, this is totally full circle. It just really happened. So I just wanted to end there because I thought it was really, tampon, circle, woman, like, whatever. But thanks you guys for coming in. I guess we'll do